Hey everybody, welcome. And we'll just give everybody just a few minutes, maybe 1 or 2 minutes. I know we're starting just a couple minutes late already. We had a little bit of a hiccup with the broadcast going live. So it looks like a lot of you are jumping in at once. So I think it was a little overwhelmed, but welcome. And we'll just give another second. I think there's still a few people coming on. Okay, give it a minute. So how's everybody doing today? Feel free to say hello in the questions area. And I was going to start with a little question. I do this in my, in-person trainings as well. Just asking what brings you here and why you decided to show up today. So you can leave that in the questions area and we can kind of, see them coming in. So Les is saying hi, Spring. Janelle, hello. Welcome. Let's see. Linda, hi. Les is feeling overwhelmed. Okay. We're going to talk about that and some emotional mastery. And let's see. Seeking emotional resilience in my workplace. Perfect, Mara. Definitely going to talk about that. Awesome. Okay. And yeah, feel free to continue writing in the chat box. Let's see, Phyllis said how to decompress. Ramon, hi Ramon. Ramon and I go way back. Participating due to interest in approaches for better resilience. Awesome. Glad to have you here. Always nice to see you. Hello, Quincy. Trying to balance work and personal relationships and failing at it. Okay, a lot of us feel that way, so you're not alone. I've also been there many a times. Beautiful. Yeah, keep sharing. Looking to share best practices with my team. Thanks, Megan. That's a beautiful intention. Kendra recently lost her brother. Thinking about you, Kendra, and we're going to talk about that, moving through loss and change. Motivation issues from Megan. So yeah, wow, everybody's really sharing beautifully. So thank you for that. And then Sky is going to be on moderating for me. And so if you guys have questions as I'm going through the presentation, feel free to send in your question live and she can, if it's relevant, and please try to make them as relevant as possible, she can send me a little notification, interrupt here, come on with her mic, and we can get those questions answered for you. And then we're also going to save about 15 minutes at the end to answer any questions. So I know things are going to come up as we're going through it. So great. Wow, everybody, thanks for sharing. Lots in the comments here. So I'm super excited to read through these after too and make sure I'm supporting you. Awesome. Trying to break bad habits, Jeanette, developed during lockdown. Yes, a lot of us have a lot of habits that are remaining. It's kind of like this aftermath, right, from the last couple of years we've been experiencing. Okay. All right, thanks. So I'm going to go ahead and close the chat box on my side. And again, Sky's going to be here moderating. And so if you guys have questions, she can definitely get those answered for you. Awesome. All right. So again, welcome. I know we had a few more people hop on since we started. And this is part of the mindfulness training masterclass series, which I believe this is about the 6th one that we've done. I kind of like to build on each other. So I know the last one's emotional mastery. So we're going to touch on a bit of that. And, I am the founder of Self by Design, and we also are in partnership with Next Gen EAP. So I know many of you are with the Next Gen EAP program and have access to mindfulness training through your EAP. So thank you for showing up and thank you for being here with us today. Okay, and as you know, we're going to talk about building and strengthening your inner resilience. So several of you mentioned the pandemic and experiencing loss and experiencing overwhelm, and a lot of that just comes back to having this reservoir and this ability to show up with resilience, right, and navigate those situations. So that's what we're going to be talking about today and moving through. Okay, a little bit about me, because who am I? So I am a mindset coach, a mindfulness trainer, and an NLP practitioner. We're going to talk a little bit about what that actually means. I've been a private coach for executives, managers, entrepreneurs. Now in the last year, I've moved into training corporations. So big shift for me, but it's been really exciting and really awesome to just support people large groups like this at a higher capacity and really just see the learnings and shifts that they're having. And the difference with me and my training, even mindfulness training, and I think a lot of corporations and individuals don't notice this until we really get into it, and we're going to get into it a little bit today, is I have a heavy focus on the subconscious mind, right? And so that is the area of our mind where all of our beliefs, habits, emotions, and behaviors are stored. And really, it's what's operating and kind of running the show, right? It's that automated behavior that we're always running on. And so our goal is to tie that with the conscious mind and even that practice of mindfulness to make us aware of those habits and patterns so we can shift them. And I believe a lot of mindset work, mindfulness training, whatever you want to call it, is really just missing this component. And yeah, this has really changed my life, changed the life of the individuals I've worked with. So I'm really dedicated to bringing that message to awareness. And taking that piece, I've created the Self by Design method, which was originally a program created for my private coaching clients. And again, now in trainings and masterminds. And it's this new age mindset method fusing neuroscience, psychology, and spirituality to master the power of our minds. And we'll define what each of those things are. But really what I've seen in my training and schooling and even working with other corporation individuals, these disciplines are usually very siloed, and the integration of them together is what creates the most and highest results for people, the biggest transformations. Okay, and I just want to give a little bit of my backstory because usually the first question that I'm always asked is, how did you get here? Why are you doing this? I used to be in marketing. Even before that, I was doing graphic design, right? So I'm very creative, but I wasn't really in this mindset space until I had a period of my life where I was just really physically, mentally, emotionally unwell. You can even say spiritually unwell. And I had a lot of physical symptoms, a lot of autoimmune problems, neurological problems, of course, depression, anxiety, cycling, and coupling with that. I went to all the traditional doctors and, did all the things that they told me to do, took the medications and did the whole thing and just was only getting progressively worse. And so I eventually found a naturopathic route or an alternative medicine route and dove into nutrition and fitness and lifestyle changes like sleep and relaxation, and really did see a shift and a lot of progress, but I was always hitting these plateaus. And I remember I was living in New York City at the time, and I had created this like perfect lifestyle from the outside, right? I'm eating healthy, I'm sleeping, I'm doing all the things right in my mind. But as soon as I would kind of slide off of that really regimented militant way of living, I would slide back into depression and anxiety. And I kind of just hit a wall and I said, forget all this. I moved to Los Angeles, and I didn't realize it at the time, but that was kind of just my liminal space, I call it, and my silent kind of introspective retreat where I was away from family and friends, and then everything just closed in on me that I really hadn't looked at the emotional, mental component, right? I've been doing everything so externally and realizing that I hadn't turned inward, and that's a lot of the work that we're going to do today and that I do with individuals and corporations, that turning inward and really recognizing those patterns, emotions, even the beliefs that you've created and the identity that you've created was not, serving me. And for many of us, there's pieces that aren't serving us. And that was where the real work was. And so from that point, I just dove into going back to school, studying neuroscience, psychology, CBT. I got trained in neuro-linguistic programming, which is a kind of a manual for the mind and understanding the mind. And then I eventually got trained in MSBR, which is the mindfulness stress-based reduction, and teaching these mindfulness practices, some of which we're going to talk about today. And the last piece of that is just really connecting with my sense of spirituality. And I believe we all have our own sense of spirituality, whatever you want to call that. It's just connection back to yourself and back to your purpose and kind of highest good and those values that you want to live and lead by, and your sense of creativity, whatever that means for you, and self-expression. So I talk a lot about that as well, and just tying those pieces together. And the last thing I'll say is I just feel culturally, it's just been, kind of something that we've missed. I think this should be taught in school, to be honest, from, kindergarten on, is that we all have this mind, right? And we all have emotions. We're all human. We all experience very similar things, but we've really gone our whole lives without understanding the mind or really having these emotional tools and, just this this access to these resources and the ability to integrate that knowledge and really apply it in our own lives. Okay, so today, what we're going to talk about, a big piece of the work that I've done and that I do with others, is building and strengthening that inner resilience. And so we're going to talk about defining resilience, what that means and what it doesn't mean, because I do think it gets a bit of a, I don't know if bad rap is the right word, but just, kind of a different lens that I don't feel is super helpful. We're going to talk about the science of resilience and the neuroscience and psychology behind that, because as you know, I love the neuroscience and I feel like that's an important piece that's often missing. And then we're going to talk about the 3 stages of resilience. And of course, I'm going to leave you with simple practices like we do every webinar. That's another big piece of my training, is especially if we're doing the full training, is I really want this to be embodied in practice and not just something that's cognitively understood and you hop on this webinar and then you go off and you lead your life. I really want these practices integrated, and that's where the true change and transformation is going to happen. And then we'll leave it open for any questions, and I can answer those as they come up as well. Okay, so let's talk about defining resilience. So what it is the capacity to meet what arises with full presence and compassion, followed by the ability to process it in a time frame that works for you, right? So we often think that really resilient people just kind of power through something and can quickly move through a setback, a loss, a change in their life, whatever that is. But really, it's finding your own internal setting, and this is going to be different for every context and every situation, but finding that own personal setting and having the tools to be able to work through that in a time frame that works for you, right? So I want everyone to understand that resilience is a super personalized thing, and you're defining it in that way, just like we define our own success or we define what love means to us, right? Resilience is a way that you define it for yourselves in that timeline that you're creating, so it's personal, and that again is creating the space for yourself to move through it. Okay, so what it's not, and it's so interesting because of course when I started teaching resilience in a training capacity, I was doing a lot of research on other resilience trainings and talking to other trainers, and so many of them are still referring to it as mental toughness, right? Or the ability to just like have that grit or personal will and just kind of power through a situation. And what I've found is that mentality, and a lot of us have carried that. I carried that for most of my life, right? Like, I'm a strong person, I can move through this, like, it doesn't affect me, it affects other people, right? Like all that crap. But what you're really doing is just avoiding it. I mean, there's a lot of strategies. I named some of them here and I've employed all of them and are seeing all of them, but avoiding, numbing, dismissing, diminishing, lots of D words, disconnecting or disassociating, right? And these are all strategies just to kind of bypass what's actually coming up for you and label that, like slap the label of resilience on it. And really what you're doing is referring back to these coping mechanisms because your nervous system is overwhelmed and you don't have the proper tools. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in the science, but our goal is to really calm the nervous system and then reintegrate a lot of that, the neural connections and even the, the biology of the nervous system so that you can move from a more resilient, calm and collected place. So our outcome for resilience is creating this shift and expanding our internal container. I call that. That could even be, your nervous system, just like I mentioned, and your capacity to hold more moments, right? So if you're a really resilient person, in my mind, is you can hold both the positive and negative. Like you can recognize, sure, this is a really hard time. I know somebody mentioned losing a parent. Like this is an extremely hard time right now. And I'm going to feel that, I'm going to be with it, but I'm also going to be able to create the shift for myself when I need to and when I feel like the timing is right to move back into the more positive space or more forward momentum space. And in doing that and learning how to do that through every situation, whether it's a small setback or a big one, we arise with greater capacity to move forward with life than before, right? It's every challenge, every situation that we face in life is teaching us something and it's supporting us in that way. And we're growing and learning with each new one, right? It's like we're stacking them on top of each other and we're moving towards just that bigger place of expansion, a bigger place of awareness and capacity. Okay, I don't know if any questions are coming up yet, but keep checking in. And I just wanted to include this. This was, if you guys were on the emotional mastery training, the last one we did, this graphic looked very similar to you, but I just wanted to give a bit of a visual to kind of speak to what I just mentioned here about expanding the container. And again, you can think of this container as your nervous system, right? And just being able to move through those tough emotions so your nervous system isn't holding on to them, and then allow in more higher emotions. And so often when we're in a place where we're needing resilience, we're often in fear, right? Or guilt, shame, just these lower kind of emotions, you call them, like these, even I have emotional frequencies here, but like lower states and resonances where you're feeling, not as good. You don't feel as high and as light and as happy and free, right? And so we're creating this container to be able to shift into those higher emotional states and call in more freedom, peace, joy, love even, and being able to kind of move through that with a higher capacity. So I hope that visual helps a bit, and I can always answer questions later about this one. I know there were some questions last time as well. Okay, so let's get into the science a bit, or the neuroscience of resilience, because as you know, we always got to talk a little science and get into the nerdiness of it, right? And I really do believe it helps when we actually understand the hardware, I call it, like the brain that we're working with and the nervous system even, and then the psychology, which is more in my perception, the mind, right, that we're working with. So let's talk about the hardware that we're actually operating on here. And this is very neuroscience, oops, jumping around. This is very neuroscience 101, right? But there's three main areas to our brain and brain anatomy. So we have the neocortex, which is our rational or thinking brain, right? And that's the most newest evolved area of the brain. So that's what makes us the most human, right? There's a lot of other primates and animals that just don't have the neocortex or the gray matter that we have, and that ability to have that executive functioning and even creativity, imagination, and even that rational mind that we can call in. And then we have another layer of our brain, a deeper layer called the limbic brain. And so this is more your emotional or feeling brain. And I'm sure the limbic system has got, which rightfully so, I'm so happy to see it, it's got a lot more coverage in our media today and more understanding, because the limbic brain really is responsible for a lot of those emotions that we're feeling, right? They're coming from that source. It's, again, a little bit of a more primal area of the brain, and it's activating that fight or flight response. And the last and oldest piece of our brain is the reptilian brain. So this is super instinctual. Like, this is literally your reflexes or super fight or flight, right? If you're in like a very quick decision kind of high danger place, your reptilian brain is going to kick in and keep you safe and move you out of that danger. And so what I was kind of referring to with that container, right, is all of us experience trauma. And I know also that word has gotten a bit of a different angle on it. And trauma is really, just any event that you've experienced in life, and, you define that experience. It doesn't matter what the event is, but that's overwhelming for your nervous system, right? You're in that time, whether you were a child or an adult or whatever, it doesn't matter, but basically your sense of predictability, order, and safety are compromised, and it's combined with the inability to process and integrate. So you're in a situation where you're just too overstimulated, too overwhelmed, and so your nervous system says, nope, like, can't deal with that right now, so we're just gonna store it in the body somewhere, or in the mind, or we're just gonna, avoid it because we just don't have the capacity for that right now. And it causes this overactivation of the limbic and reptilian brain, right? Because you can't be in your executive functioning and the, more higher evolved parts of the brain, because the blood flow even and the resources need to be in this fight or flight response, because your nervous system is saying, we're overwhelmed, we're in a state of danger, let's pull our resources back and be in this, be in these primal parts of the brain, because we need to react quickly or we need to protect ourselves. And many of us can get stuck in this place, and I was stuck in this place for a really long time, where you are just hyper vigilant, right? And the past becomes the present. So even unconsciously, a lot of situations that you're bringing up and situations where resilience would be required, you're just going quickly back to the past and reacting in old behaviors and patterns, right? And then possibly you're feeling like you're not resilient or you're not able to move through something because you're just reverting back to a past strategy that really isn't super supportive right now. And so as a result, you have this lower capacity in your nervous system, you know, even just in your whole kind of capability field to process those emotions. And so what are we going to do? It's like the container's full. I wish I had like, oh, I do have my glass here. It's like this container's full, right? It's all the way up to the top. It's like we can't add any more in. So then if you have another situation, even if it's a small setback, like you know, a friend calls you and says that they're upset with you or whatever that is, you can't add any more to the container because you're already full. And so you're just going to offload possibly on other people, or just, you know, doing it in a way that's unhealthy, or just avoid the situation completely. And so really what happens, and again, we've all experienced this even at a low level, is you kind of sever or disconnect from the neocortex, or the prefrontal cortex as it's labeled here, which is that executive function. So you're not really thinking rationally anymore, you're just thinking emotionally, and you're just reacting with these more primal areas of the brain. But good news is we have neuroplasticity, and I know I've talked about this previously, so hopefully this is starting to feel familiar to a lot of you, but that is the brain's ability to adapt and change, right? And so we were taught years ago that the brain really doesn't have much ability to adapt and change after early childhood or even after infancy, but now neuroscience has proven at a high level that we can create new connections and changes in the brain at a pretty high level, especially with our intention and strong emotions involved, and we can really direct that change. So we have the power to create new connections and to, you know, direct that, even like resources and blood flow back to different areas of the brain. So essentially what you can do with neuroplasticity is you're adding new neural pathways, like these neurons in here. I always think you guys can see my mouse and you can't, but these new neural pathways in your brain, and you can strengthen connections. So if there's a connection that feels good or is supportive of you, you can strengthen that connection, and you can disconnect from old pathways. So again, if you're in a place where resiliency is required, but you're just reverting back to an old strategy that just clearly doesn't work anymore or is not applicable to the situation, we can kind of weaken that pathway or even disconnect from it completely. And this is a lot of the work kind of unconsciously that I'm doing, you know, in trainings and with individuals. So essentially you're moving from a fixed mindset. I don't know if any of you have read about mindset or growth mindset, but you're moving from this fixed mindset and literal like fixed neural pathways. So you're running the same patterns, you're having the same emotions, you're having the same habits every day, every moment, to a growth mindset. So you're moving into a place where you're creating new connections, you're creating more brain synchronization, so you're connecting up more of those areas of the brain, and then you have higher cognitive functioning in that neocortex because you're able to direct more resources, attention, energy to that area of the brain that is the rational thinking mind and is even the conscious kind of mindfulness part of ourselves. And the last thing I'll say about that is this is always happening, right? You're always like, if you go on a trip, your neuroplasticity is pretty active. You're like, what is this new place? And like, where should we go to dinner? And oh, I didn't realize I reacted like this on vacation or whatever, right? And so it can be organic, but in these trainings and in this situation, we're self-directing it. So we're saying, hey, like we have the ability to change our brain, our mind, and our circumstances, and we're going to take some responsibility and some agency over that. Okay, and then Sky, let me know if anything's coming up too, but I'll keep it moving.
We did get one question.
Sure.
Yeah, Lisa wanted to know if you could explain a little bit more about how emotions get measured in hertz.
Oh yeah. Okay, so I'll click back to that quick. I don't want to get too and so yeah, the hertz on there, and that was just something that I've pulled from previous trainings, and I see that more as almost if you study brain waves, like if you're in a lower hertz in a lower state, then you don't have as much energy, or you're not as alert, and in these higher kind of functioning states, right? And so I just kind of see it as like moving through that spectrum. And so we want to be able to move through that spectrum fluidly, right? Like it's okay if we're feeling guilt, shame, apathy, these lower hertz or lower energies, whatever you want to call it, this lower resonance, but we want to be able to have the tools and again, like that agency, I love that word, and that even kind of control to move up into higher states if and when we need to, when the timing is right. And so it's just kind of moving up and down that spectrum. But good question. Okay. Awesome. And then just to kind of, yeah, come back to neuroplasticity. So we have the ability to do this. And what we're doing with a lot of resilience, mindfulness, emotional mastery, right? It's all in the same kind of container here, is we're moving back to wholeness for ourselves and back to wholeness for the brain, right? It's all one and the same. And so we're really learning to calm the limbic brain over here, which is that fight or flight response, right? So learning to calm that down with meditation, with tools, with a feeling of safety, whatever that is. I have obviously a lot of practice for that, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but calming that area of the brain and then moving the resources back to the prefrontal cortex. So that is, again, where we have more insights. You can have more creative ideas like, oh my God, I didn't even realize I had the ability to solve this problem, or I could think about this painful situation in a new way because you returned that cognitive functioning. And this is where a lot of emotional regulation, body regulation, just fear modulation, it says here, anything that's really regulating those emotions in the other areas of the brain are returned to the prefrontal cortex. And so this area of the brain is really kind of the you want it to be like the CEO of your brain, of the brain as a whole, right? And so just kind of leading the way instead of the limbic and reptilian brain running the show. Okay, so we're going to talk about 3 stages of resilience. Oh, I thought I heard somebody come on. And this is just a practice. Well, there is practice involved, but kind of a method that I've designed, and again, I employ in the trainings and with individuals, and just moving them through resilience if there's a really challenging time that's presented. And so we're going to talk about those stages right now. Okay, so we always want to meet the moment first. And it's so interesting because this is usually the part that most of us try and bypass, right? And especially when I was doing a lot more private coaching, working with somebody new, it's like they immediately want to go to like, especially if they know I'm teaching mindset work and yeah, just like those higher levels of conscious, like I just want to like go back into positivity, and I want to just kind of bypass what's really going on for me. But we always want to meet the moment where it is. And this is the first stage of resilience. And some of us are really good at doing this. I should probably say that on the other side, but at least what I've come across, and maybe it's part of the way that I used to operate, is you're kind of just like, well, that was really tough, but let me get back to what's good in life, or like, let me go back to positivity. But we want to meet ourselves in the moment where we're at. And the only way to really do that is to create that awareness. So this is a lot of mindfulness training, another whole huge component which I teach, but just really creating the space for yourself to make the unconscious conscious, just like we talked about those patterns, those programs. So instead of a challenging situation presenting itself and you just think, oh, okay, quickly I'm going to react and I know how to solve this, giving yourself that space and saying, I want to choose differently this time. Maybe I don't even know what that choice is. I don't know where that's going to lead me, but I need to have that awareness and create that space for myself. And then you're adding choice back in. So instead of unconsciously automatically reacting, you now have a choice. Do I want to do this? Do I want to reach out to this person? Do I want to make this change, right? You have autonomy again, authority again. And then we want to accept it. And so the other thing that most of us do is you label it, right? Like, again, this happened in my life, this is really bad, or this happened in my life and this is great. And you're always labeling and categorizing everything. And so we want to move into a more of a neutral space where it's not good or bad. It's not really hard or really great, right? It's just kind of like, oh, okay, I'm not going to judge it. This is here. This is my reality. And I'm just going to get curious and see what's here for me. Like why is this situation presenting? And what do these emotions mean for me, and kind of get more curious about that. And then this is the most important piece, and we're going to practice in a second, but just being with it, right? So now you have the awareness of what's coming up. You've accepted that it's really not good or bad doesn't really mean anything, and just you're kind of open to like, what's here for me? And then we want to be with it fully. And again, we don't want to bypass this place of the resilience process. So just really see it, hear it, feel it, and however you want to define that, the emotion, the situation, whatever that is, and show up with presence, kindness, and compassion, right? So as you're experiencing something, just acknowledging like, hey, this is really hard, or I feel really sad right now, or I am extremely angry right now. Whatever that is, just be with it and let it come up and arise. And then we're going to move through the next step from there. And so this is a little bit different from what I've done in the past, but I kind of wanted to talk about a practice that complements each of these steps. And this is one of the most powerful practices that I believe I have in my toolbox and that I always want to provide to others. And it's called the empty chair practice. And so for the first step of this resilience transformation, or just, applying resilience to your own life, you can employ this exercise and really just think of a situation or a person that you have an emotional charge with, or whatever is coming up with you right now, right? And you can even just, if you want, as I'm talking through it, just kind of close your eyes and think about going through this. Of course, you're not going to do this right now, but I would love for you to take this home with you and be able to employ it, even if after this call you hang up and take 5 minutes and run through this yourself. But you can set up 2 chairs facing each other, or you can even just stand in one position and then alter positions. But I want you to physically move through it, because I'll have people all the time be like, well, can't I just like do this in my mind and talk it out or journal it out or whatever? And the answer is no, because I want you to really feel what it feels like to be in chair 1, which is your current self and the current situation with your beliefs, your identity, and your feelings, and then what it feels like to be in chair 2. So chair 2 is your highest self. So you're coming from that place of compassion, empathy, and understanding. And often we're in chair 2 with family and friends and coworkers, right? And we can show up and be like, hey, what's going on for you? And like, oh, I feel that, and that's tough. And like, what else do you feel? And how else are you moving through it? And I'm here. But then when it comes to ourselves, we don't give ourselves chair 2. Maybe we try and seek it outside of ourselves, which is, also a way to support. But I believe giving it to yourself first, because you have the resources, you have the answers to really have that conversation with yourself first before you're taking it outward and kind of seeking support elsewhere. So chair 2, yeah, again, represents that higher self and that place of understanding. And you can really just ground yourself before you start the practice. Take a deep breath is what I'll always lead people through. Like really just feel the ground, get into your body, take a deep breath, and then you just open the conversation and you take turns switching between each chair. That's why I love the actual physical difference of the chairs versus even just standing there. And you can do this with your eyes closed, so it's almost like a moving meditation. And you just start the conversation with like you would with a friend, like, hey, what's going on right now? What's coming up for you? I feel that. And then you switch positions and say, oh, well, this is what's happening for me, and it means this, and I am just destroyed by it, right? And then highest self, switch back to the other chair. Okay, I'm here for you. I know that's hard. And really, in this first part of the process, we don't want to solve anything, right? And so I'm sure we've all done this in our own lives too, when you show up to a friend or a situation. And even in coaching, I did this in the really early stages. I was like, I want to solve this for them and help them. But you don't really want to solve anything. You just want to be with them and be with yourself and be with the emotions and show that you're here for them. And then we can talk about shifting it and or solving it, if you want to call it that, but looking for a solution, right? But giving yourself this space, often the solutions arise much quicker, and they're much higher quality solutions, if that's the right word. They're just much more supportive of you. And really the other intention of this first part of the practice is just getting into that executive functioning neocortex part of the brain. Like you're just calming your whole nervous system. So all of a sudden your container is so much bigger and you have so much more space and capacity to take on this challenge and really say, okay, I'm giving it this time. Now I'm able to shift it, instead of trying to do it like in between, meetings, and like you're running for lunch or whatever. And you're like, I just need to deal with this. That's just not enough time and space to really give our nervous system and ourselves that compassion and that love. Okay, so once we've done that, you can move into the second part of the 3 stages of resilience, which is just shifting the experience, right? So we've been with it, we've fully felt it, now we can shift it. And I feel like now that I'm like looking at myself teaching here, I'm basically showing you a kind of a back end of the coaching and what I do here. But your ability to shift that experience and change it for you lies at the belief level, right? And so this is a lot from cognitive behavioral therapy, but there's always an activating event, whether that's internal or external. And of course, that's a situation that you're working through and searching for that resilience for, right? There's an event or some sort of trigger, and then there's your beliefs about the event, and then there's the consequences or the outcome or the results. And the area that we have the most control over and the most agency over is the beliefs about the event. And I think most of us don't realize that. We just think, okay, that happened, I felt this, then this was the result. And then you kind of just loop back over and you're running the same pathways. And so we really want to kind of, alter and jump in this cycle at the beliefs level. And so you can kind of explore, okay, what is the belief here? How am I creating this suffering and attachment a bit for myself, right? What is this belief not supportive of me? And then how can we change the narrative? And changing that, again, will always change your end consequences instead of trying to do it the other way around. And this can also be, I'm going to go back to the practice here, part of the chair practice, right? So as that friend or whatever you want to, the highest self, or just the person that's kind of leading you, you can show back up to this chair process, and this is all in one conversation. And now you can talk a little bit about, sure, like give me more context in the situation. Like I've already kind of been here with you, we felt this, maybe you've already discussed that with yourself, and you can get into the belief. So what do you believe about the situation? And this is such a powerful question because we often don't ask this to ourselves or even to friends or others, right? You're just, maybe sometimes we can show up and support them in that way, and then we're just trying to quickly move to what's the end result. But where's the belief? Where is the kind of old patterning or the evidence that you're looking for in this situation? And then once that arises, what are some healthier, more supportive beliefs about the situation? So how can you reframe, kind of change perspective, or just what's something that's really going to support you here versus maybe a belief that's been, that might have worked in a past situation but isn't working for you today. And then how can you use that new belief or that new way of being and seeing to create new, better outcomes? And often I believe we don't even have to ask this question. I know this is the ABC, like CBT model, but those outcomes are going to shift for you automatically based on your new belief. Okay, just give it a second. And then the last stage is moving forward, right? And so we've felt it, we've been with it, we've looked at the root cause of things, we've shifted that belief. Now we want to move forward with that sense of confidence, responsibility I put here, and agency. So some questions you can ask yourself is, what's the next best step I can take, right? Or what's the next best scenario? And sometimes even in coaching, I'll have somebody that just gets stuck like, well, I just want this. And like, I would just want, this is what I wanted. Like, perfect. And possibly that's not going to be available to us right now. So what's the next best scenario? And that gets us just thinking creatively and out of our old patterns and into a new, explorative state. Or even, what would my highest self do in this situation? So let's say you're still sitting in your chairs, you can even ask your highest self and kind of like switch the narrative a bit and be like, hey, so what would you do here? You've really guided me through this, and you are coming from a place of just much higher understanding. So how would you react in the situation? And often we can find a lot of resources there and be able to move forward with that. And the kind of outcome here is really just moving forward with openness and optimism. So now we're able to arrive to that place like, yes, the situation is challenging. This is hard, right? And there's some beliefs about it, and there's some old patterns and behaviors, but how is it working for me, right? How is the situation supporting me instead of working against me? And often we can get stuck in that, like, why me? Life is unfair, life is hard. And all those different narratives that are unsupportive and even can be tied back to beliefs, but the situation is always working for you, even if you can't see it in the time. And so you can start to just ask, like, how is the situation working for me? What are some new lenses and angles that I can take and see? Or even, what is the lesson I am being asked to learn? And I truly believe that every challenging situation has a lesson in it for us. And it's just asking us to see that lesson and take those learnings into the next area of our life. Or you can ask, what is this trying to show me? So these are all just kind of ways of opening and exploring new possibilities and moving forward now that you've adapted this new sense of resilience and this higher capacity for life. Okay, and I wanted to just leave a few simple takeaway practices. Let me just look at our time. Okay, yep, about right on time for some questions. And as far as simple takeaways, I always, again, do this in trainings, and even with coaching clients, I'm like in the last second, like, let's do this and do this the next week. We've got to fit this in. But just giving you the tools to take home with you. And we just ran through this chair practice, right? And these 3 stages, and you would need a little more space for this, even if it was 5 to 10 minutes. But there's a simple practice that even I employ in my own life, has been super supportive. And of course, I've given the tool to others, and I call it just a 3-part practice. And it's really just a summation of what we just led through, these 3 steps. I probably should have even labeled it 1, 2, 3 now that I'm looking at it. But just, again, meeting the moment. So stopping, breathing into the painful situation, and then just saying, and even if it was like a comment that was made or an email that received or something a little bit smaller, or just kind of a daily life frustration, just saying, I trust this is happening for a reason, right? So just quickly switching the narrative before you have the ability to be like, oh, this person just doesn't like me, or like things don't go right, or my day is horrible. Just moving right into that, I trust this is happening for a reason. And then you want that moving forward last step. What's the next best step I can take to move forward? Right? So what can I do from here? Where can I go from here? And already in like 3 seconds, you've just changed your neurology. You've moved back into executive functioning, and you've just retaken control and autonomy over your ability to shift and move through the situation. Okay, and then I just left you with a couple more simple practices. And of course, they're super simple, and I love that because they're doable, right? We want things that we can do in our everyday. And so I've often recommended, if somebody's really struggling with some hard times and just in a challenging place, building a resilience reservoir. And you can even do this, you don't have to be in the challenging space. You can do this in a proactive state, right? Kind of like repairing the roof when the sun is shining, but just creating this reservoir. And you can have a journal or a diary, or even just a notes app on your computer, or app on your phone. Just open up a notes page, and you can add a list of difficult situations that you've overcome. And I always like to say, with what resources and support. So especially if I was working with somebody, there's always situations where you're like, this is really hard. I've just, lost a parent, or lost my job, or whatever has come up for you. Well, how is this similar to a situation in the past? Oh, well, I've experienced loss in this area. Okay, great. How did we overcome that? Because you did. You're here with me talking today, right? So what resources and even what support did you employ then, and how can we bring that into the new situation? And often just having a log of that and being like, oh my God, I totally forgot that I had been through that, or I moved through that. Like even this morning when I was reading my presentation, and I was kind of thinking back to like my personal story and being like, that's right. You went through that. That's like, you managed that, you become resilient in that way. And then you can also add to that log just what's going well in life, right? That always just helps us build that container up and create more space, and just add in those higher emotions, and even, I know we call them like higher frequencies or resonances of what's going well, what's beautiful, what are you grateful for. And so we can always come back to that as the last stage of the process, of course, like after moving through it and shifting the belief, so getting to that subconscious part of it, but then just returning to like, there's really great, beautiful things in my life, because all of us have so much beauty, so many blessings, and so many great things in our lives. And it's just creating the capacity to continually see them and expand that container for yourself. And the last one, I had to do it, as mentioned, mindfulness meditation. So I could even say that meditation is literally the practice of resilience, because it's this 3-step process, but just in these like micro cycles, right? So you're being with what is, you're sitting in meditation. That's why it's so hard for people to just sit down for like 5 minutes and just be with themselves. And even with the breath, it's coming up, maybe a thought's coming up and you're letting it go. And you're just being like, not right now, I'm just gonna let it go, right? And so mindfulness meditation is just practicing resilience. It's basically like practicing life when you're on the sidelines or in a practice mode, instead of game time trying to do it in the moment. And so mindfulness meditation is a really great tool for resilience. There's a lot of forms of meditation as well, but mindfulness, just following the breath, is literally like it's coming up for you, you're noticing it, you're moving through it, and then you're letting it go. So I had to leave you with that as well. Okay, and the last thing I'll say, what are we at? Okay, almost 10 minutes left, is I just wanted to mention, and this is my perspective shift that I'll even come to if times are really challenging, and just kind of remembering this truth of the beauty of impermanence, right? And so life is always changing. Nothing really is permanent, and it's our attachment to the way things should be, or even life is going really great and we want things to stay the same, but it's just not the nature of life. Like life is always changing, it's always moving. Even if you watch nature, there's no stopping it, right? The sun's gonna come up and come down, and the seasons are gonna change, and the flowers are gonna grow and die and grow again, right? It's always in a state of flux. And so we as humans are part of nature, we're part of that life flow. And so it's just understanding that it's all moving, it's all impermanent. You really can't hold on to any situation or any piece of life, and just returning to the idea that that is life's natural state, and it's here for your highest growth, your highest learning, and your highest evolution. So it's always in support of you, even if in the moment it doesn't feel like it and it feels challenging, it feels hard, it's always working for you. Okay, and let's see, we can take questions pretty soon. And just as far as working with me further, this is just a glimpse into the Mindfulness Mastermind. So this is the program that I've created to work with individuals. Again, like I said, I used to do a lot of private coaching. Now I'm doing these group coaching programs, and we're moving through a lot of these stages that we talked about today, but just at a much higher level. And so if you're interested in that, and I'll send the slides so you can see a little bit of the kind of month-to-month overview of what we move through, and you can visit the website. And then for corporations, I know we have a lot of HR managers and training facilitators and people like that on the call today. We offer the Mindfulness Leadership Institute. So this is our 6-week live mindfulness leadership training. And again, we're covering a lot of these pieces and creating more mindful, resilient, and compassionate leaders. So I truly believe that supporting leaders, and that's anybody in an organization, in having these tools and skills that they can employ at work and also bring home, is really going to create the biggest shift. And I'm just so grateful to be able to have access to a larger group and be able to lead individuals, in that corporate setting through these different steps. And we always start with the foundation of mindfulness, move into the subconscious identity. So again, that's kind of the difference in my program versus other mindfulness programs. Build rituals and routines, work really at a high level on emotional regulation, because it's so important, and then talk about mindful communication and those skills, and then tie it together with leadership. So there's more information on the website there. You can book a call and we can talk more. And then Next Gen EAP, I just wanted to say a big thank you to our sponsor. I really believe in this EAP program because they're bringing in mindfulness to their whole suite of EAP services, and not just offering the counseling, but also the mindfulness aspect, which I believe is so powerful. Okay, and we can take a few questions. I know we have about 10 minutes left, and I know Sky's still on, I hope she is, to answer any, or to present any questions.
Yeah, I'm still here. So yeah, someone asked, how do you help someone who is resistant to this help?
If they're resistant, I think the first step is really not moving into the help, because we often have an idea about what the help looks like for them, but moving towards the resistance, right? So it's kind of like you think the problem is something else, and that's why you're trying to help them, but the problem. I don't even like using the word problem, but the challenge is in the resistance. So you might just show up and kind of explore through that process, right, that we talked about, of meeting them where they're at and knowing, like, I say, you know, saying like, I know this is hard, but where is the resistance? What is the belief? What is the kind of narrative that you've created that is the block or the barrier to moving through this transformation on the other side, right? And so just kind of showing up as that higher self in that other position to help them move through those stages, and shift the perspective. And always as individuals, and I think this is the beauty of all relationships, is we are reflections and mirrors to each other, and we have these different perspectives. That's just part of being human. And so you can see something that often they can't. And I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to show up and say, hey, I see this for you. Like, just, you can try it on. I'm just offering it. I'm not saying you have to do it or you should do it or using any of those words, but just kind of offering them what you see and just how you're able to support them. And I think just creating that space for people really just opens a lot more capacity for them to move through it. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Nicole. Yeah, we also had another one come in that says, how can we break the infinite loop of negative thoughts and calm ourselves down?
Yeah. Okay, so I think for that, and like even just listening to the way the question is presented, is we often do this too, right? Is you want to break the negative loop and then calm yourselves down. But it's kind of like the reverse, right? So to break the negative loop, we have to come from a calm place. So the first thing I would suggest, and I'm not sure how severe or like how much this negative loop is affecting you, but it's just returning to a place of calm initially. So it might even literally just be, and I still do this for myself as a practice a long time ago, is just putting my, hand on my chest and like one on my belly, like one on your heart, one on your belly, taking a few deep breaths, and then thinking, okay, how can I react differently? So I've created the space, I've calmed myself. I don't want to run the same negative ruminating loop over again. I know it's not supporting me, but what's the next step? Or like, what's the shift that I can create, right? And so I think the main takeaway is just coming back to that place of calmness and centeredness before you shift. And just doing that is like, you've already shifted it, right? Because now you're not running the loop. You're more focused on creating calmness and centering yourself. And then your brain's like, oh my God, we don't have to like run the same pattern. We have like 6 other patterns that we could run, and let's try one of those on and run that pattern and loop instead. And again, going back to the neuroscience, you're literally creating new pathways in your brain, and you're designing a new nervous system, and you're showing up in your life entirely differently. So yeah, anything else?
Yeah, there's one last question that I think would be great to answer. And someone wanted to know, are all these classes covered under the EAP plan? So maybe it'd just be a good opportunity to like explain the mindfulness training with NextGen.
Yeah, so under the NextGen EAP, you have access to these quarterly trainings, and then there's a portal that you can log into. And Sky and I also work really closely to present different content and articles and things that you have access to as part of your EAP. If you want to do further training, that's where we could talk about enrolling you in the mindfulness mastermind if you're an individual. So that's that group coaching. I never take groups more than 5 individuals at the most, usually like 2 or 3, and we're really able to dive into things and work closely together. Or if it's a corporation and you want training for your team, that would be the Mindfulness Leadership Institute. So that 6-week training, and then there's 6 weeks of support after, is a higher investment and a premium training in addition to the free training that you have with your EAP. So I hope that clarifies things a bit.
Awesome. Yeah, that's all the questions we had come in.
Awesome. Okay, great. I will, I'll let everybody hop off a few minutes early then. Maybe you have time to do your chair practice. How exciting. So yeah, feel free to reach out if anyone has further questions. I left my email here, the website, and then Instagram if you are on social media. All ways of reaching out to me. And yeah, please practice those different exercises at home because I know how transformative and life-changing they've been for me and for others. And so I really encourage you to just create the space. It's not a lot of time. It could be 5 minutes before your coffee in the morning or whatever it is, to just be with what's coming up for you and just moving through it. And either way, for all of you who have participated today and shown up, I just want to say thank you. I just really appreciate you for showing up today. I know that you've taken an hour out of your day to really be here with me and all of us in this call. And it just really fills me up to know that there's so many individuals interested in this work and doing this work. And I really, really appreciate you being here for yourself and for all the relationships in your life. So that being said, have a great rest of your day, and hopefully I'll see you in the next training. Bye.